Carr. And here's the first question. What is the difference between the regulatory project manager and the regulatory business project manager? Who is the direct contact for the...
Good morning, everyone. The regulatory project manager is the primary and direct point of contact for the entire ANDA. So if there's a question about labeling, quality, bioequivalence, or anything else, that question goes to the regulatory project manager. Whereas the regulatory business process manager works directly with and for the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality. So they have more of the direct work with regard to quality, so facilities, biopharmaceutics, business process, and those kinds of things.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next question for Captain Carr. What is the criteria used to grant a MRCM meeting for CGT designated products? Are all ANDA with CGT designation being granted MRCM?
Okay, thank you for that question. The short answer is no. All CGT ANDAs are not eligible for MRCMs, and questions with regard to how that's determined should be directed to our PET team, our policy team, and that email address for the PET mailbox is CDER, CDER-OGDPET@fda.hhs.gov.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have another question for Captain Carr. What do you do if you miss the MRCM notification letter and were not aware until the teleconference of the teleconference day and time?
Okay, good morning, everyone. Again, let's see, if you missed the meeting notification letter, that's okay. Normally, you receive a meeting notification letter within 14 days after the ANDA has been accepted for filing. You'll also receive a meeting agenda about 7 days before the mid-review cycle meeting. So you shouldn't have an opportunity to actually miss the meeting. However, in the event it comes down to the wire and you haven't seen any of those notifications, please contact the regulatory project manager as soon as possible.
Thank you for responding to that question. We're moving on to our next presenters right now, and we're waiting for our document to upload. It may just take just a moment. We do have a question for Commander Metu, and here's the question. Yesterday we heard a presentation on data integrity issues identified during bioequivalence studies. Should sponsor-identified data integrity issues be specifically noted in the ANDA cover letter?
Thank you so much for that question. I would recommend that any information that is pertinent to the review of your application be noted in your cover letter.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next group of questions will go to Dr. Lee, and here's the first question. Is the mid-cycle date, or MCD, the same for priority and standard submissions?
That's a great question. And no, the MCD or mid-cycle date depends on the GDUFA clock. So for a priority submission with an 8-month GDUFA clock, the mid-cycle date will be around month 5, or 4 months at midpoint plus 30 days. If it's a 10-month GDUFA clock, the mid-cycle date will be around month 6, or 5 months midpoint plus 30 days. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next question for Dr. Lee. If I don't receive a discipline review letter, does this mean there are no deficiencies in my application?
Another great question. And not necessarily. If there are no deficiencies identified by the mid-cycle date, the agency will issue a discipline review letter that indicates that there are no deficiencies that have been identified at that time of the assessment. However, the DR letters do not necessarily reflect input from all supervisory levels, so it is possible the complete response letter may contain additional deficiencies. And then lastly, each discipline, so quality, bio, and labeling, will be issuing discipline review letters. So just because you don't get deficiencies for one does not mean you may not have deficiencies for the other disciplines.
Thank you for responding to that question. Again, if you haven't entered your questions into the Q&A chat pod, please do so now. We have one last question for Dr. Lee, and here's the question. Can you please provide the communication time points for the review of a minor and a major amendment?
Thank you for the question. It's another great question. So submissions that are received after the first assessment cycle of an original ANDA submission, so your amendments to a complete response letter, the IR and DR letters may continue to be issued at the discretion of a discipline or subdiscipline.
Thank you for responding to that question. We're going to go back to Captain Carr to see if the technical difficulty was solved. And here's the first question for Captain Carr. Do we always need to include the submission size on the cover letter? And what should we include the size as a background? What should we include as the size for a grouped submission?
Good morning. I think
Hi,
that
it's Captain Carr. I
question may
believe
have
that
been for my
question.
presentation for me, Lieutenant Commander Metu. And yes, per the ECTD submission guidelines, the size of the cover letter and size of the package is recommended to be added to the cover letter.
Thank you for responding to that question. This one definitely goes to Captain Carr, and here is the question. How do applicants request mid-review cycle meetings?
Hello again. Hopefully you guys can hear me well this time. Applicants do not have to request a mid-review cycle meeting. The mid-review cycle meeting is automatically flagged and identified upon submission. So if the ANDA is eligible for a mid-review cycle meeting, the RPM, the Regulatory Project Manager, will contact the applicant first with that meeting scheduled notification letter, and then second, they'll receive the agenda. So you don't have to schedule, you don't have to request it. It's automatically offered to you. However, if you haven't received the meeting schedule letter within 14 days after the ANDA has been accepted for filing, please give the RPM a call or email.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have another question for Captain Carr, and here's the question. Can applicants submit requests to increase the length of meetings, like longer than 30 minutes?
Hi. Actually, no. So the meeting is limited to 30 minutes, and we really try to make sure that we answer or refer to all of the agenda items during that 30-minute period.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next question for Captain Carr. can applicants submit questions during or prior to the meeting?
In general, the agenda is limited to the FDA agenda. However, if applicants have questions before or during the meeting, they can ask the questions. However, the reviewers may or may not respond based on the level or intensity of the question, because sometimes they have to do a little bit of work to answer more detailed questions. So the short answer is yes, you can submit the questions, but the longer answer is, however, we may not be able to answer those questions that you submit, especially if it's submitted within a short time period.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next group of questions will be directed to Commander Metu. And here's the first question. Can you please elaborate about when is the priority request, and when should it be included?
Thank you for that question. The priority requests are usually submitted after a complete action has been a complete review cycle for the FDA, or if at any point your application you believe has changed to a priority status and you're now requesting it. So it doesn't necessarily have to be after an action. If your application was already granted priority from a previous cycle, that is something that has to be noted and requested on the new cycle. However, if for some reason during a active review cycle you believe that your application is now a priority status, you could submit that request separate from an FDA action to now prioritize your ANDA.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next question for Commander Metu. Does the agency have a preferred length of the cover letter? Also, does a cover letter attachment go in the same section 1.2?
Thank you for that question. The FDA doesn't have a preferred cover letter length. The length depends on the amount of information that is necessary to provide. There, you could put information in the cover letter. You can also put information in the appropriate modules of the submission. And we also do accept cover letter attachments that has information contained in it that is for review.
Thank you for responding to that question. I have another question for Commander Metu. Does the FDA prefer applicants to put their response to IRs within the cover letter?
Thank you for that question. The FDA doesn't have a specific recommendation on whether you put that information within the cover letter or separate from the cover letter. It is the applicant's choice. That information will still be reviewed either way.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have one more question for Commander Metu. Is the FDA suggesting that we not combine submissions and submit them separately?
The FDA allows combining submission types, for example, an administrative request and a review of content for the application. There is no preference. However, if you are going to combine submissions, for example, putting an IR request and a labeling update, that you indicate that very prominently on your cover letter so that we are aware that this submission has multiple aspects to it.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next group of questions will go to Dr. Lee, and here is the first question. What is a secure email?
Thank you for that question. A secure email is an electronic message that is sent from an applicant that has exchanged secure certificates with the agency. So secure certificates typically include the entire corporate or organization structure of an applicant or the subset of users. And secure email makes use of encryption technology during the transmission and decryption upon receipt.
Thank you for responding to that question. And the next question for Dr. Lee. Is there any cutoff time of asking for an extension for an IR or DRL, as on the last day of the response something went wrong? Can we ask a day or two or more on the last date?
Thank you for the question. Requesting extensions, if it's needed, it should be done as soon as possible. However, we do understand that things happen and sometimes on the last day. So if an extension request is needed, please reach out to your regulatory business process manager, your RBPM. And the RBPM with the assessment team will make a determination as to whether the extension request can or cannot be granted.
Thank you for responding to that question. We do have another question for Dr. Lee. What does it mean when an IR or DRL response is deferred?
Thank you for the question. So if an information request or discipline review letter response is deferred, it means the assessment of that IR/DR letter response will be assessed the next review cycle, or when a response to the complete response letter is submitted. So in this scenario, if an applicant receives a complete response letter, but has responded to some of the identified deficiencies previously in an IR or DR letter response, the applicant does not need to resubmit the previously submitted information in the complete response letter amendment. However, the applicant should clearly identify that the previously provided IR/DR letter response was already submitted.
Thank you for responding to that question. If you haven't had a chance to submit your questions in the Q&A chat pod, please do so now. We're waiting for a few more questions to come in. And so we'll monitor as we look at some more questions here. It'll take just a very brief moment to see if we have any more that we can ask. Well, we're not seeing any more come in right now. So let's enter into our break time, which is a little bit early. That's what's stated on the agenda. So we'll go into our break and return at 10:25 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Enjoy your break.